Stenberg Assessment. Stay tuned for your host.
Thank you for tuning in to another episode of the LOU STENBERG Assessment. This is Season 1, Episode 4, Historical Rerun. I hope each and every one of you doing well, being safe. In the last 3 episodes, we've spoken about slavery, oppression, and a system that is problematic because white America, who are, in case you forgot, the lawmakers, politicians, local and state government officials, your president, institutionalized institutions, basically your big corporations and schools and banks are your institutionalized institutions. And they are the operators of our failing system. The so-called run-of-the-mill superior class of our society that have stolen your American dream. Those are who we call white America. The same group of individuals that have destroyed and divided a beautiful nation by creating what I call social behaviors, which have caused a division and has driven the citizens of this great nation even further apart. This past weekend, Americans, we celebrated our independence from Great Britain, the Crown. The event leading up to North America independence can be found through the pages of history books, we know that, movies, and in museums. Through eyewitness accounts that were documented, we are able to look back and read word from word who said what and who did what regarding our history. But when we look back at the Boston Tea Party, which is one of many historical events leading up to the American Revolution and the Declaration of Independence, we know about the Sons of Liberty, a group of civilian Bostonians led by Samuel Adams, John Hancock, Dr. Joseph Warren, John Adams, and Paul Revere, had started a political protest called the Boston Tea Party because of Great Britain's imposing tax laws without representation to help them pay for the French and Indian War. King George III was not pleased at all. He required, as stated in our history books, he needed law and order. Now think very carefully. Who in today's time are calling for the same law and order? Who in the last 3 months following the George Floyd's death has demanded what the British king was demanding of the Bostonians and the remaining 12 other colonies? Think about it. And I'll return back to answer that soon. But King George III ordered the British Army, who was led by General Thomas Gage, a ruthless British general, to use whatever necessary force he saw fit to bring law and order to the 13 colonies. Colonial colonies, that was. Does that sound like anything we know? Anyone that deployed U.S. military convoy to bring law and order over the recent protests and rioters? I'm referencing our current president to what was going on in 1773 because there's a close similarity to today's time, except we're not fighting the British government. We're fighting our own government. General Gage sent his soldiers to rough up the people of Boston because they were rebelling against what they felt to be oppression. So the Bostonians felt oppressed. Paul Revere and all his friends felt oppressed, as do the protesters currently in this day and age and the rioters. General Gage would make public speeches reminding all colonial colonies that until law and order was established and until everyone learned to submit to the king's order, the British soldiers would remain in Boston and go to the other colonies where law and order needed to be established. General Gage would make public speeches as to say, Boston will know order. Any man who is in violation of His Majesty's laws will be dealt with without mercy. They shall be dealt with a swift and just punishment. And those that comply, there will be no need for unpleasantness. This America, my dear brothers and sisters, mothers and fathers, these were the words that echoed through Boston and the 12 other colonial colonies from our enemies. And these are the same words that are echoing from state to state by our leader, the President of the United States. This is a historical rerun, except we don't have British general. We've got the President of the free world uttering those same words and behaving like the British general. We've got the President of the free world uttering these same words and behaving like the British general. Just before all 13 colonial colonies came on board to unite and defeat Great Britain of its hold over the 13 colonial colonies, before the Revolutionary War started, President George Washington, who at the time had not become President of the United States yet, but was known as a general already in the state of Virginia within its military, had written a letter to General Thomas Gage prior to the war. Washington writes on August 11th, 1775, "Let your opinion, sir, of the principal, which attitudes them, be what it may. They suppose they act from the noblest of all principles, a love of freedom and their country. But political opinions, I conceive, are foreign to this point. The obligations arising from the right of humanity and claims of rank are ununiversally binding and extensive, except in the case of retaliation," unquote. The person who wrote President Trump's speech about law and order should have read Washington's letter to General Thomas Gage. Maybe, just maybe, President Trump would have a better understanding for the Declaration of Independence and what it all means. He would see that the protesters today are no different than the people who were once called thugs and traitors, fighting for their civil liberty, standing up against their oppressors, are no different than the people you, Mr. President, call terrorists and thugs. You, Mr. President, are no different than General Thomas Gage, whose words you seem to utter time and time again. America, wake up. because you are reliving the tyrannical days of your history. It's a historical rerun of 1773, which should be greatly unsettling and disturbing to you. Mr. President, here is my letter to you. You cannot be for the American people and stand side by side with us on the battlefield when you're uttering words that were once used against the people that created this great nation you serve, against everything we fought for, our rights and our independence, to gain our freedom. It is time we reread our history books and listen and understand the words that once created devastation and bloodshed on American soil. I want to go back to something I mentioned earlier: social behavior. Because when the person in the highest seat of this failing nation utters words which were once used by our enemies to create fear and chaos, that's exactly what you get: social behaviors. Behaviors that is influenced by members of the same species, aggressive and temperamental group of fearful people living within our society. Sociologist Irvin Goffman describes it best when he explains the classification of social interaction. He states, social interaction is the process by which we act and react to those around us. This process can be categorized into 4 stages. Aggressive is the first stage. It is unexplained act of anger in which the aggressor intends to hurt someone or something. We tend to see more and more of this stage within our society. People are living in fear to express how they truly feel, afraid that their words may cause someone who does not agree with them to snap into a fit of rage. I want to share my own personal experience of this stage of aggression. It was a few years ago I signed up for a class, but it was not given in the town I live in, so I had to transfer to the same community college just in another town. Everyone in the classroom seemed very friendly and kind. As we approached the 3rd week of class and the conversation turned into a political debate, I chimed in to voice my political point of view and was abruptly interrupted by a female classmate who seemed to be far left on the issues we were discussing. She stood up out of her seat, looked at me, pointing her finger, and told me to shut the F up, that I didn't know what the hell I was talking about. Then she said, "I don't want to hear what you have to say," as she walked out of the classroom and didn't return till the next day. And when she did return, she never apologized, nor did the professor say or do anything to rectify her behavior. Her social behavior was not corrected due to fear. And I do believe she will continue to behave that way with aggression every time she feels her political beliefs are being threatened. This unacceptable behavior is learned behavior we have acquired through institutional system. It's learned from watching the leaders of our nation leading by horrible example. The far left lets out their rage against the far right, and the middleman gets the brunt of it all. These political fights for power is destroying not only the country, but the people within the country. The next stage is assertive, having the ability to appropriately express one's own wants and feelings. But we can't get to this stage because the first stage is where we're all stuck at. Then we move, which we're supposed to be moving freely between these stages, but then we move to the third stage. You and I are moving to the third stage. The rest of society stays at stage 1. Well, half of society stay at stage 1. But let me explain what stage 3 is. To be seen but not heard. These individuals within our society know it's probably better not to engage and share their insight or contribute something that may be useful because of the violent nature of aggression from people who are stuck in stage 1. So that part of our society remains dormant, inactive within our society. The last stage is the passive-aggressive stage, in which a person indirectly expresses negative feelings instead of addressing them. Could we say that our society as a whole are divided into 2 of these stages? The aggressive and the passive-aggressive. One group of our society thinks, speaks, and reacts, while the passive-aggressive group within our society soaks it all in as it festers through their body like a cancer that sickens them. And the only cure is to become like the very people they despise. Well, listeners, our time has come to an end. But before I go, here is my assessment. Our leaders must get reacclimated with American history. It must be reread and understood in a universal language for all to appreciate and connect with culturally and socially. So our history may be looked upon with pride and honor. It is your humble understanding of American history that will motivate and encourage a divided society to come together as one race, one creed, under one God, for one liberty for all. As a society, we must unlearn the behaviors we have sadly developed. We are all different in appearance, but we are all the same under one nation. Our time has come to an end. I hope you enjoyed this episode, and truly just think about what this episode is all about. It's time for change, and the change needs to start from within. We need to figure out where we are going wrong and start to make those changes. We cannot keep going down this road. Thanks for tuning in to the LOU Stenberg Assessment. Hope you'll join me next weekend for another exciting episode. Be well and may God bless.